Now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. And don't forget, sign up for our weekly newsletter at www.justenergyradio.com, where you can check out our over 5 years' worth of show archives. So in this hour, we're going to be speaking with Susyn Reeve about living an inspired life. Let me tell you a little bit about Susyn and get her on the air. Susyn Reeve is the co-founder of SelfEsteemExperts.com and the award-winning author of Choose Peace and Happiness. She has 35 years of experience as a coach, corporate consultant, and InterFaith Minister. Her clients have included American Express, New York University, Exxon, Continental Airlines, the Metropolitan Museum, and Young Presidents Organization. Susyn lives in Long Island, New York. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Susyn Reeve. Hey, Susyn.
Hi. I am thrilled to be here with you today.
I am so happy to have you on. Have you ever noticed that when you get on the phone, your other phone always just starts ringing?
Yes, and it's a phone that I don't know how to turn the sound off of.
I have been known to put my other phone in the desk drawer.
Yeah, I just put it under a number of pillows.
Oh, you gotta love it, you know?
Yes,
anyway.
Absolutely.
So, Susyn, let's just start easy. How did you get into the whole field of, coaching and working with corporations? I mean, you have a pretty hefty list of big companies that you've worked with doing, I'm going to assume self-esteem work, but coaching work with. How did you get into that whole area in the first place?
Yeah, well, I looking back on my life, people have always shared with me their deepest secrets and very personal conversations. So I think that speaks to how I got into this coaching field. The corporate work happened because I started straight out of graduate school. I first worked in a family court system, and I did custody investigations and marriage counseling for people who had filed for divorce and had kids under the age of 14. And I was really dealing with some very serious problems that I must say graduate school might prepare one for conceptually, but it's a whole different experience to actually work with people who are dealing with horrendous domestic violence, serious sexual problems. So there was a part of me in this work that was both curious to hear what they were going to say and wondering, how am I ever going to think of anything to say that can be helpful? And so I went from that work to being director of a rehabilitation facility. And again, in that position, I worked with people who had recently had strokes or spinal cord injury. Again, very, very serious problems. So that by the age of 26, I had pretty much burned out, although that word wasn't in the lexicon then. So I thought, I want to do work in corporate America. And I started asking people who do organization development, what do you do? And I discovered that they ask people, what are your goals? And then they ask people, well, where are you now? And then they dream up ways to move from where people are now to where they want to be. And that's really what a rehabilitation process is. And I was familiar with that. So I started doing corporate work and thought that I would not be dealing with as serious problems of a serious in nature. But, wherever people are, there are serious problems.
Very much
and
so.
What I discovered is that while people were very interested in changing the outside circumstances of their life, like maybe getting a new job or getting a promotion or wishing their employees were different, that truly the only way change could take place was if I changed, was if the person I was speaking to changed. And that led me to take a look at what were their beliefs about themselves. And did they believe that by their making a change in their thoughts, in their words, in their actions, that could influence the workplace? So that's a long answer to your question of how I wound up working in corporate America.
So is your work in corporate America what drew you to write your book, The Inspired Life?
Actually, my work in corporate America resulted in my first book, which came out in 2003, Choose Peace and Happiness, because I was at that time, one of my consulting clients was Mount Sinai Medical Center, a huge medical center in New York, asked me to create a program for employees called The Simple Guide to Peace and Happiness. And so that led to my first book. And The Inspired Life came out of my more specific focus since about 6 or 7 years ago on self-esteem. And that my belief is that when we have a loving relationship with ourselves, then we can begin to look at and declare and own and embody the life that we truly want to live, which is an inspired life.
So what are the characteristics of an inspired life?
Well, quite simply, an inspired life is a life of passion and purpose. And it's the kind of life that when we wake up in the morning, in general, we greet the day as a gift. It's the kind of life where we have a clear direction. And so people ask me, well, what's your inspired life vision? And my inspired life vision for me is to be a mighty expression of love in the world. Now, throughout my life, that has looked a variety of different ways. And the way that it looks right now is that I am out promoting my book, The Inspired Life, leading workshops, teleclasses, doing individual coaching with people who want to contribute to the changes that are going on in the world, oftentimes feel that their dreams are bigger than they are. And so this work focuses on what are the ingredients, what are the components for living an inspired life.
Can someone live an inspired life if they have like a regular 9-to-5 job?
I do think it's challenging, and the answer is yes. Because it's so much of living an inspired life depends on our attitude and our point of view. How do we view the world? And so wherever we are, we have the capacity to truly feel that who we are and the skills that we have and the work that we do does make a difference. One of the challenges that I find in the workplace, and this does not apply to every single department in every single workplace, but so often the main paradigm, the main thinking is one of complaining, finding somebody to blame for a problem, focusing on problems, and losing sight of what is the mission of this organization.
Well, I think that if they thought about that part, then they wouldn't want to be there.
Well, and that might be the case, yet there are people for whom to take the leap, to leave their current positions is just too much of a leap to take.
Mhm. But no, I agree. There are
time.
a lot of places that you go to and I'm thinking, as a customer, for example, that are just toxic. The one that jumps to mind the quickest is, the Department of Motor Vehicles. They just look at you like, excuse me, you're interrupting me from eating my donut. I mean, no offense if anyone's listening that's from that, that works there, but that's how it feels.
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of workplaces where supervisors, managers, leaders in the workplace really don't understand how to nourish and nurture the people who report to them. There are people, I've worked with supervisors and managers for 35 years who don't know how to train people, who are uncomfortable about confronting somebody about their performance. So who's really in charge there? Sometimes it's the people who complain the most. And that creates an energy. You're absolutely right. It creates an energy. And then I sometimes wonder, and how do I contribute to that energy? By expecting that when I go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, I'm going to be met with a long line and people who don't seem particularly helpful.
Well, I try not to participate in that.
Yes, exactly. And I find that I make a conscious decision, because I'm not that good with, I can get frustrated when I'm on hold for a long time with customer service, and I have to remind myself to be kind and generous to the people I'm speaking with.
Yeah, and that can be challenging, especially if you get hung up on 3 times or whatever, and you have to go through 500 million buttons, but you hit the wrong button, so then it sends you to the wrong place, and then it disconnects you, and you spend 20 minutes trying to get to the right place to only sit on hold. Yeah.
Right. Or you go to a menu of 9 items, and by the time they're on number 5, I've forgotten what number 1 is.
Oh, yeah, that space out zone. What? Oh, yeah, I'm on the phone. What were you saying? Well, and then you have to hang up on yourself because you don't even know what you're supposed to do.
Right. But there are certainly many, there are many opportunities that we walk into circumstances and situations where the energy is toxic. And I think that it's really important to play with the idea that I might be able to impact this environment. Does it suck me in? Or can I impact this experience by the energy that I radiate?
But I think it can go even smaller than that, not about impacting the energy of the environment that you're in, but just impacting your own energy. I mean, I know from a personal place, I've worked at some pretty funky energy places. All right, not the DMV, but other places that were not particularly friendly. And I would just make the decision, it's like, you know what, I'm not going to allow their funky energy to affect me, and I would just have my own little, I would just create my own little space and just be happy and do my little work that was required.
And I think that if everybody knew, or if more and more people knew, that each one of us does have that power to influence our personal experience in the moment, maybe the world would be a little more cooperative, a little friendlier, a little more loving, sooner rather than later.
But I think most people think that being happy or experiencing joy or things like that is just something that comes naturally for some people and not for others, and particularly them.
Yeah, I think, certainly the people I see come to me because something is not feeling right for them in their life. And in general, I believe that joy is something that has to be cultivated. Yes, some of us have grown up in environments where our family members were filled with a sense of gratitude and appreciation. I mean, I'm trusting that that has existed for some people. That isn't what I didn't feel that way growing up. But what I do know is that we can make a choice, each one of us, to how do I want to view a particular circumstance. One of the things that I noticed about myself years ago is that when I was in traffic, I'd be sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheels. My knuckles would be white, and I would be pissed off. I would feel victimized by traffic. And it occurred to me one day that never did that reaction make cars move any faster. And so I started playing with, okay, when I'm in traffic, what's another viewpoint I can have that can make this time more pleasant for me? And so I came up with the idea that whenever I'm stuck in traffic, as soon as I can remember, I'm going to focus on, oh, this must be the safest place for me to be right now. How do I want to use this time? And that changed my experience of being in traffic. I have still gotten stuck in traffic at times. There are still moments when my initial reaction is to grip the steering wheel and feel that immediate sense of victimization. And I've practiced for so long that as soon as I become aware of that, I focus my attention on, this must be the safest place for me to be. And then I'll either listen to a book on tape, maybe I'll make a phone call, or maybe I'll just sit and I'll look at the sky. But otherwise, I felt that I was really perpetrating abuse on myself.
Mm-hmm. And I think, sometimes people get to where it's like, everyone is doing this to me. They're keeping me stuck in this traffic. And it's like, no, this is just how the traffic is, and you are amongst a bunch of other people who are all feeling, stuck and victimized by all the other people that are stuck in the traffic.
Right. I have found it's really helpful for me to remember that the only way to truly change my experience, yes, I can move the chess pieces of my life. I can change the circumstances. But to have long-lasting change in my life, I really need to upgrade the programming of my mind.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's based on the idea that our thoughts, charged with emotional energy, spoken of with authority, and acted on with conviction, describes the creative process. So if I'm sitting in my car feeling like a victim to traffic, I'm really not thinking thoughts that support my well-being. So if I play with my thoughts and focus on, in this moment, what do I want to have happen? Well, I'd like to show up for my appointment on time, or at least be able to let them know that I might be late. And I'd also like to experience well-being. I don't want my blood pressure to go up. I don't want to create an ulcer because I'm in traffic. And make up a new thought that supports the experience that I want to have. Because ultimately, the only thing that we can really change is our attitude, is our thoughts. So why not use that power?
Do you think that... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. Well, I had an interesting conversation with my 10-year-old granddaughter recently. She was very upset about something. I listened to her, and then I said to her, well, what is another way we could think about this? And she looked at me, and she was really serious, and she said, it really doesn't matter how I think about it because this is a feeling that I'm having. It has nothing to do with thinking. And I turned to her, and I said, did you know that your feelings are generated, that your feelings come from your thoughts, whether or not you're conscious of the thoughts? I mean, she really had thought before that our feelings and our thoughts were totally disconnected.
At least she acknowledged that she was having feelings. I think that's a pretty positive thing.
Yes. absolutely. She's an amazing, amazing child.
How, one of the things that just kind of came to my mind, you're talking about these thoughts and patterns that we have that sound kind of negative. How do they affect, and I'm going to just throw out our ability to operate with the principles of the law of attraction?
Well, I mean, they're certainly played out in the law of attraction, because what do we wind up creating? We wind up creating the same misery over and over again. The law of attraction is based on what our primary energetic frequency is. So if I'm feeling victimized by life, then I will see whatever circumstances show up in my life as proof of that victimization. I mean, there it is, the law of attraction at work. So when we really understand that we can create new brain pathways, we can create new patterns of thinking, and thereby create new experiences based upon our thinking. And I think a challenge for many people with the law of attraction is they think, oh, okay, I'll just think a new thought. You have to embody that thought. You have to be that thought. So if you have a thought of greater prosperity in your life, or the relationship of your dreams, then you have to be that person today in order to attract that experience to your life. I work with a lot of clients who say to me, well, when I have more money, or when there are changes in my relationship, or when I'm healthier, then I'll be happy. Then I'll feel a sense of peace and contentment. And it really works the other way around. When you experience a sense of peace and contentment, when you believe that you live in a loving universe that always meets you with a resounding yes, then you become, it's as though you're living from your future dream. You become that person now in the present moment. And that's really powerful.
I hear you. I mean, I have a lot of female clients that they want to get into a relationship, but they don't want to get into a relationship until they lose some weight, X amount of weight. And it's kind of like, well, why don't you, work on trying to find the relationship, and, then maybe the weight will just come off by itself because you're using it as an obstacle for you to achieving what you really want, because I feel like you want to lose weight, but it's not really your number one priority.
Right. And then I sometimes ask clients I had one client who said to me, I really believe that before I can be in a satisfying relationship, I have to deal with all my issues. And I said,
that's going to take several lifetimes. No.
Life will constantly present us with challenges because we live in an evolving universe. We are always deepening and expanding our capacity to give and receive love. So I like to say to clients who say, I have to wait to be in the relationship that I want until I lose weight. I say to them, well, who will you be when you lose weight? How will you feel about yourself? Because in order to lose weight, you better start feeling like that person right now.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's really interesting the conditions that we set up on accomplishing our goals, and how we self-sabotage in a way that sounds so acceptable. I've heard what you just said from so many people. When I'm thinner, then a relationship will work for me. Well, it's really your radiance and your magnetism that attracts people. It isn't your weight.
And with some people, but if what they have in their mind is, the belief of I'm fat so nobody's going to love me, then,
yes.
I mean, I tell people it's like, well, this is what you're saying you're wanting. I go, but this is what you're broadcasting out into the universe. I'm fat and nobody loves me. It's like, so I'm not quite sure how you're going to, create a relationship that way.
Right, and then how can you really receive somebody else's love? Because from what you've just described, if somebody is projecting that somebody out there is not going to love me. But the real work is, do you love you? Do these added pounds, do you berate yourself? Do you judge yourself? Do you consider yourself unlovable? Well, if that's the case, you will not be able to maintain a loving relationship over time if you don't love you. And that's really the basis of the work that I do. I find over and over again that it is our relationship with ourselves, truly getting that we are divine beings, and loving ourselves, which, again, does not mean that we're not going to be faced with challenges in life. But if my feeling good about myself is dependent on you reacting to me in a certain way, then I'm really at your mercy.
One of the things that I see so much is that I'll just say it this way, as a society, we're not taught to love ourselves, and we are so not taught to receive. Now, there are a lot of people that have learned how to take, but there are many people that have never learned how to receive.
Yes, and I'm going to add to that there are also people who have not learned how to give without strings attached.
I like it.
Yeah, the receiving is really crucial. I had just a simple experience recently. I was in this wonderful bookstore in Capitola, California, and in the bookstore there's a cafe, and the barista was making cappuccino for somebody, and he made a beautiful design with the foam, and I commented to him and said, "Whoa, that's really beautiful." And he said to me, "Well, no, it really isn't that good." And I looked him straight in the eyes, and I said, "I just gave you a compliment." And he said, "Yes, I know, but I'm telling you the truth." And I said, "Well, my compliment was also the truth." But sometimes it is so hard, as you said, Rita, for people to accept the good about themselves. But if we don't cultivate a loving relationship with ourselves, it's very, very hard to receive. We can always find something wrong. Our lover, our partner brings us flowers, and we're not happy because why are you bringing them today? Why didn't you bring them yesterday? Somebody gives us a present, and instead of appreciating the thoughtfulness, well, why did you ever buy this for me? And so learning how to say thank you and letting it truly sink in is a skill that many of us have to develop.
And it can be kind of hard and scary.
Yeah, and it's hard and scary because we're not used to it. It's hard and scary because if I believe I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable, I'm not enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not, whatever your version of I'm not enough is, if you believe that about yourself, then truly accepting a compliment means that you really have to transform your relationship with yourself. A particular way of thinking has to be put to rest. And that is a death of sorts. It's a transformation of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think we're not valuable and worthy and lovable, then let me share a story with you. I was married straight out of college, 9 years later, divorced. And about 8 years after the divorce, I wrote to my former husband, and I wanted to get copies of family movies that we had made together. And I got a letter back from him after a few weeks that he had considered my request and he was not sending me the movies. I thought, this guy really has a problem. Maybe it's because I didn't send money for him to make copies. So I sent another letter with an attitude. He was director of a hospice program at the time, with an attitude that in these movies are, movies of my father who died years ago, and you're director of a hospice program, and here's a check. And, I thought he really had a problem. And, again, weeks go by. I get another letter from him. He's not sending them to me. So about 6 months later, I go to a forgiveness workshop at a place in New York, the Open Center. And the woman, Robin, I can't pronounce her last name right now, but she's done a lot of work in prisons on forgiveness. She has us do a guided visualization. Close your eyes, there's a door on the right, somebody's going to walk in and forgive that person. And my former husband walks into my visualization, and in my conscious, logical mind, I can hear myself saying to him, I forgive you for having an affair, I forgive you for not being available when my dad was dying. I'm saying all of these things that are like ordinary things to forgive. Mm-hmm. And I hear another voice, and it's as though the voice is coming. It's very soft. It's as though it's coming straight from my heart. And what I hear is, I forgive you for loving me. And it really got my attention. And I thought, this was the fatal flaw in my marriage. I didn't love me. So it was really challenging for me to accept his love. Now, 10 days go by. I'm in New Hampshire for the Christmas holidays. I'm in this enormous supermarket, and I know that he's in there. And I walk up and down the aisles, and I find him. And we say hello, and he said, did you get the movies? I sent them to you about 10 days ago. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that the quality of the forgiveness that I truly got, that it wasn't things that he did. It was my ability to receive love, my lack of ability to receive love, that really created the difficulties in that marriage. And when I looked at the movies, there were one image after another of wonderful, loving times that we had together.
The part I find interesting is that he sent the movies not much after you forgave yourself.
Exactly.
I mean, but see, that's the law of attraction at work to me. It's like,
yes. Exactly. And I didn't go to that workshop so he would send the movies. I really went to explore forgiveness. And that's what happened. A space was created for, in this case, these movies, which were an expression of our love. And simply because we had separated and divorced years later didn't mean that love hadn't been real.
Mhm.
So, go on.
One of the things that I tell clients that are looking for jobs, and they'll come in and they're going, I hate my job and I don't really want to be there and I hate my work and, but I'm sending out resumes and I can't ever, find a job and no one's calling me and blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of what you experienced. I'll tell them it's like, what you're sending out is I hate working. I go, so you need to change your attitude and get into your work, and enjoy what you're doing there, and kind of put that you hate your boss to the side and just get into your experience of being there and doing the best job that you can. And, and doing it for you, not for anybody else, but for you. And I'm like, because you'll start getting the phone calls because you're not blocking your energy anymore.
Exactly. I mean, it's, I hear you describe this, and it sounds so simple. It is such a new way of thinking for people because we think that what the outside circumstances are, we don't see how they're related to us. But it is our thinking, it is our energy that impacts all of the circumstances of our life. That's such a powerful idea. It's really, I really find, I get energized just thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. So is there stuff that, that we can change, or like you said, it's something that we can change, but is it really hard to do?
Well, I think that my personal experience has been that it's hard to do alone. We certainly can do it. There are people who can do this all on their own. But I like to start with people by having them express what their dreams are. If you knew you could not fail, if you weren't afraid, at the end of your life, what you want said about who you are and the life that you've lived. And sometimes people have a very difficult time even thinking that way. So I start with them, okay, what's not working in your life? Say what you don't want. And from that, let's transform that into what you do want. So you're unhappy with your work? Well, what do you want in work? Well, I want satisfying work where I use my skills and abilities and I make a contribution and I am paid well for it and I'm appreciated. I mean, begin to define what it is that you want. What's your dream? And not the dream of what other people are telling you you should want, but what's your heart song? When you think about what you really desire, what do you love? And give yourself the opportunity to explore that. And then take a look at when you think about living a life that you love, embodying the qualities that represent this life, what thoughts pop into your mind? And oftentimes people say things like, this is bigger than I am. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I know how to do it. Well, great. You're beginning to become aware of the programming that will sabotage what you want. There are two simple exercises that I suggest people to do right away that can have an impact on their attitudes and on their experience of themselves. The first one, and many people have heard of this before, is to make a list of 5 things you're grateful for and include on the list something that you've never expressed gratitude for before in your life, so you can be playful with this. Like I'm sitting in a room right now that has a ceiling fan. I've never expressed gratitude for a ceiling fan before. But just play with being grateful. And then also include on the list something that you are grateful for about yourself. I'm willing to make changes. I'm willing to ask for help. I'm grateful for my courage in admitting that there are things that I don't know. And the other is to make an accomplishment list. And I find that on days that I'm feeling overwhelmed and questioning whether I'm really getting anything done, is that I wake up in the morning and I write what I have accomplished in the past tense. And just the idea that it's accomplished gives me an energy to move forward. So what happens with this? One is I begin to see myself through the eyes of somebody who accomplishes things. And with the gratitude list, I begin to have feelings of gratitude, of gratefulness for the gifts that are present in my life. That energy attracts more of the same, more to be grateful for, more to acknowledge our accomplishments of. So those are 2 things I suggest immediately.
I mean, I love working with gratitude. My husband thinks I'm nuts, But he's actually started doing it, because something will happen and I'll just be like, thank you, and he'll just look at me, and I'm like, what? But it's really funny. You'll appreciate this. It's really funny. He gets very frustrated driving, and so when he drives down surface streets, city streets, he hits every red light. Every red light. And so sometimes he'll go to me, you should drive because you don't hit the red lights, because we'll go. We travel down like these two roads to get from our house to the freeway, so we're on it at least daily. And and I just like zip, 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 and maybe I hit one light, maybe, on kind of a bad day. But him, everyone, boom, 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 and I'm like, that's because you just get so angry, like the light's out to get you. It's like, well, just be cool with the light. Create a relationship with the light,
Yes, exactly. Be the light. But, it's so fascinating how these simple changes in perception have a huge impact on our experience. So, it makes me wonder if, as your husband used to get into the car, was he already anticipating the red lights before you even left your driveway?
Well, I don't know, but maybe I should ask him.
But, it's so funny. Like, I drive into Manhattan frequently, and, getting a parking space there can be a challenge. And so what I started doing a number of years ago is that I would imagine, the day I knew I was driving in there, I'd get into my car, and I would imagine myself already in the parking space, out of my car, looking at my car parked on the street and saying, what a good space this is. Yay. Now, that meant that I didn't do the entire 2.5-hour drive wondering, am I going to get a parking space? Am I going to have to pay for a garage? Is this going to work? How far am I going to have to walk? Do I have an umbrella if it's raining? That kind of chatter used to fill my thoughts on the way to a potential parking place. I was really preparing not to get a space.
I like the way you phrase that.
And that is the law of attraction. I think what's so important about the law of attraction is for us to really get that it's operating all the time, and that we are the ones who give it direction. It isn't something that happens to us. It happens through us. We live in a universe where there's one verse, and the verse is yes. And it's always saying yes to our dominant vibrational frequency. And people often say to me, clients often say to me, well, I was focused on the new work that I want, or the new relationship that I want, or loving my body, and I hear this other voice that says to me, who are you kidding? And I say to them, well, we can do deep work during a session on that, and if that pops up at any time, simply say to that voice, thanks for sharing. Acknowledge it. I have found that for the most part, those what I consider negative voices in me simply want to be acknowledged. Instead of, I for so long resisted them, and there's a saying in Aikido, a martial art, which is what you resist persists.
Yeah, until you work through it or overcome it or push it to the side or whatever.
Yeah, we're a very interesting species, aren't we?
Very much so. Let me ask this. Are there certain emotions or energy patterns that people can start to raise their awareness to that block us from living the life we want? We've talked, I talked a little bit about anger, but, What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely. That's such a great question. You know, when we become aware that we're feeling angry, frustrated, I mean, these are all feelings that have us feel separate, disconnected, essentially disconnected from source, victimized by a circumstance or a particular person. And so whenever we notice that we're feeling angry, frustrated, worried, fearful, sad, hurt, betrayed, whatever the feelings are, to acknowledge that we're feeling them. And oftentimes we feel them in our body. So acknowledge that we're feeling them. And then I like to use our feelings as a way to become aware of what our thoughts are. And an exercise to do that, and I find that to do this as a writing exercise is really helpful. I like the word writing because it can also be RIGHTING. It can turn things right. And that is when I am feeling, you write angry, frustrated, whatever you're feeling, I am believing. I am believing about myself, I am believing about others or this circumstance, and I am believing about life. And then look at those beliefs without judgment about them. And ask yourself, do these beliefs support the life I want to live? I mean, what's anger? What's fear? It's a call for love. It is not proof that we are victims to the circumstance. It's saying that we've bumped up against something in ourselves which feels disconnected, constricted, and separate, and is asking for our love. Instead, what do? We make up a story about how he betrayed us or how this person hurt us or why this circumstance is so terrible. Just when we're called to look inside, we're busy focusing our attention outside.
Well, we're taught to do that, though. We're not taught to look at our feelings or pay attention to them or acknowledge them. We're told to, quelch the cries, don't be scared. We're not told to acknowledge any of our feelings.
And so what I'm excited about is that I live in a time where consciousness has evolved, so more and more people like you, like the work that I do, like so many of your guests in the recordings that I've listened to, who are focused on thinking is always evolving. And so we know the results from our own experience. I know from my experience of growing up, of feeling like I was being victimized all the time. If I bought something in the department store and I got it home and I discovered it was missing a button, I really believed I was the only person that ever happened to. Nothing worked for me. So suddenly I make a missing button my persecutor in life. Proof that life doesn't. I mean, it sounds so goofy right now, but I can remember those experiences. And so we have the opportunity, those of us who have committed our lives to being mighty expressions of love in the world, to have the kind of conversation I had with my granddaughter. Not telling her she was wrong, listening to how she was feeling, and just offering her this bit of information, that it's your thoughts that generate your feeling. So your thoughts really do count. Let's now play with what are other thoughts that we could make up that would be more supportive.
It just makes me curious what the thought was in the first place that she was getting tangled up with. Do you need to know? You don't necessarily need to know, but generally you can. Generally, you have some story about why you're feeling that way. And if you listen to the story, I mean, it was very clear she thought she was going to be criticized later on in the day by her dad for something that he wanted her to do that she thought was going to be too hard to do. So, she didn't want to be, she was feeling bad that he was going to be criticizing her
hours before she was even going to be going out with him later on that day. And so she was worrying about a future in the present and creating a lot of anxiety and worry. What I can tell you is when we finished our conversation, she and I were both giggling. And then what happened? It rained that day, and they didn't even go out for the run. After all of that, the circumstances didn't even occur. I mean, that to me, again, is the law of attraction. She let it go. She created space.
I just think it's interesting how much people worry about stuff and how they can just let it control their lives so thoroughly.
Yeah, because I think that most of us have not learned how to be in the present moment. So either we are focusing on something that went on in the past and how we should have handled it differently, or how we were a victim in that situation, or, as in the case of my granddaughter, focusing on worrying about something happening in the future, where if we take a moment, focus on our breath, and look around in the present moment, we see that we're absolutely fine and safe. But we haven't learned, you've mentioned this a number of times, we haven't learned that. And so when we do learn it, I just spoke with a client today, and I said to him, he was going to experiment with, he was going to set an alarm in his clock, and once an hour it was going to beep, and he was going to bring his attention to the present moment, first by focusing on his breath, and then feeling his feet in his shoes, his feet on the floor, the seat beneath his body, the air against his body, just so he could have practice being in the present moment, because oftentimes he was not in his body. He was actually in some worry.
Did it help him?
It did. He thought it was a good idea, because he said, I start my coaching sessions with a centering visualization, and I end the centering visualization asking the client what his or her intention is for our session that day. And he, after we did the centering exercise, he said to me, this is what I want to be able to feel. I was in the present moment then, and everything felt okay. And so based on that, I gave him some exercises to do during the week that would support him in playing with being present, not judging himself for not being in the present, but create an opportunity so you have more practice being there, and so that you have a path to get there, which in this case is his breath and paying attention to his physical body in the moment.
Cool. Susyn, our time is up. If somebody wants to get a copy of your book, well, let me ask a different question. Do you work with people over the phone?
Yes, I do.
And so if they wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
The best way to do it is through my website, which is Susyn Reeve, and my name is spelled in an unusual way. It's SUSYNREEV.com. And they can contact me through my website. They can get a copy of the book, and they can also get an excerpt. They can download an excerpt from the book as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Susyn, so much for sharing your time with us on the show. And
thank you for this opportunity.
And continue living an inspired life.
Yes, for all of us.
Great. All right, Susyn, I'm going to let you go. The music's going to come up here in a second, and you have a great weekend, okay?
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. That was Susyn Reeve. That's SUSYN Reeve. Her book is The Inspired Life webpage, SusynReeve.com, or www.self-esteem-experts.com. Next week, we're going to be talking about 2012 is the end of the world upon us. And to do that, we'll be speaking with John Michael Greer. So, until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita. Until next time, remember, it's all just energy.